Welcome back to the Traverse Tavern. While everyone looks towards the challenge events upcoming at the end of the month, I wanted to take a look back to a few weeks ago with the Into the Inklands set championships. Specifically, I made a post on Twitter calling out for players to share experiences at these events that surprised them, good or bad. There was a whole host of responses in this thread that ranged from the entire philosophy of a competitive event to how difficult it was to deal with a physical timer for the rounds. Before I get into all of this though, I would like to preface this conversation with the fact that I am as competitive a player as possible, so my answers and views on this topic will predominantly come from my own opinions on this topic mixed with a few conversations I've had with others. Live Laugh Lorcana has a wonderful podcast on this topic that goes into their experiences and reacts to some social media discourse. Some of their views on this topic differ from mine, so I urge everyone to go give them a listen. I will have the link to their video in the description. To set the stage for this conversation, we should probably recap exactly what these set championships are. These events are a fun way to challenge other Lumineers and better your own skills. As always, give your best effort, treat others with respect, and have fun. This is the exact wording Ravensburger used when introducing these events to the world. The way I interpret this statement is that these are gateway events for newer players to dip their toes into competitive events, while also being enticing enough for more competitive players to join as well. This took the form of a Swiss format tournament with top cut that is dependent on how many people join. Feel free to take a look at this graph here that shows how many rounds and how many people will make the top cut. These events run by randomly pairing people with similar records into each other who then play a best of 3 match. This is considered one round. This continues until the amount of rounds that match the graph are finished, and then the players with the X best records, where X equals the top cut number in the graph, play a bracket style single elimination tournament to decide the winner. Now the prizing included in these set championship kits were 4 enchanted versions of the set 1 super rare Rockstar Stitch, and 2 playmats with the same art on it. The stitches go to top 4 and the mats go to top 2, where the champion mat goes to first place. Stores were also free to add any extra prizing that they wished as long as it was not monetary prizing, so any entry packs / extra packs for top cut varied per store. These events ran for a 9-day period from April 20th to April 28th, and stores seemingly were able to pick what day between those 2 points that they wanted to have their event on. There were 0 guidelines on who was or was not allowed to play in these events, and there were no limits on how many events you could participate in. With that out of the way, we can sort through some of the main topics of conversation both within my thread and in the wider community. Starting with where I think a lot of people were surprised by, expectation versus reality. The way these events were marketed was, for a lack of a better word, murky. It felt a lot like these kits were just airdropped into stores with a very basic skeleton of what the event was supposed to be, with a big old good luck sticker tacked onto the package. Because of this, I think stores just defaulted to making pretty normal announcements of this event as a competitive tournament with exclusive Disney prizing, which unsurprisingly was a beacon calling out to competitive players everywhere that meant these cards were likely going to be valuable. And by making the marketing for these as wide as possible, there was obviously things that were missed. Particularly, new and less experienced players that frequent these shops may not be getting the full picture. If you are mainly focused with just playing the Disney card game you fell in love with without much initial thought on competitive play, I can absolutely understand seeing your local game store advertise a tournament and getting shell-shocked when over half the people that showed up looked like this. Understandably, this is a tough situation to be in, and no one should be blamed for how it went down, especially the players playing in these events. I'm sorry that some of you were taken aback or maybe even got upset that these players were there, and I wish that these events were communicated to everyone a bit more clearly. For me, I am a competitive player at heart, and this is the way I enjoy games. Traveling to different areas I haven't been to and experiencing different players, playstyles, and decks, while honing my skills as much as possible by competing with higher stakes than normal locals, because that's when I feel like I'm playing my best and get the most enjoyable games. I also love trading card games and the business of the stores that stock them, so any chance I get to strike up a conversation with a new store owner or a good player I haven't met before is one I want to take up. With this, I fully understand how I can look when I come into a new shop all serious and ready to compete, so I make a point to be as respectful as possible to every single person I come across when competing. I will say yes, insert pronoun of choice here, when speaking during the game, and I will always reach my hand out to say good game regardless of the outcome, and then offer my initial thoughts on how the game went if I think it's warranted. This is something that every player who wants to go to non-local areas to compete needs to do. Even if you aren't attempting to make someone's day worse by just being there, it's possible and maybe even likely that you are doing so without really trying to. So you have to be the most respectful / nice person in the room, even if it requires more effort than normal. It's a little late to set expectations for the first event differently, This will likely be the standard for these events, and while this isn't trying to say deal with it, you now have the experience to decide for yourself whether this level of competitive play is for you or not. Everyone deserves the chance to enjoy the game in their own way, and if people coming from out of town with the sole intention of winning the prizing for this event is a bit too much for you, there's absolutely nothing wrong with taking a step back and reevaluating how you want to experience it. In a similar vein, there were some who were upset about people being allowed to play in events even after they obtained a stitch at another event. I won't spend too much time on this because I think it connects a lot to the expectations versus reality part before, but I won't diminish anyone for feeling like winning multiple stitches is uncouth. And I won't badmouth those who did do this. Like I said, everyone deserves a chance to enjoy the game at their own pace. This also applies to the strangers coming from out of town. And it seems to me that these events are spread out over this period to be flexible with schedules, as well as giving players the opportunity to play in as many as they want. As long as everyone is being as respectful as possible, this seems like a case of do what you want for me. Okay, we're almost through the really heavy stuff, but before I move on to specific examples that were given in the thread, there is still one pretty major topic that has been debated a lot in the past few weeks, since this is the first time that a lot of people experienced it. Intentional draws, or IDs for short. I could spend an hour explaining exactly what this is and when it is used, but the abridged definition is both players agreeing to draw their match instead of playing it out, which will lead to both players guaranteeing themselves 1 point rather than playing to win 3 points, or risking losing and gaining 0 points. It is often done towards the end of an event when you have determined the threshold of points that are needed to make the top cut and seeing that you are only 1 or 2 points away from that threshold, so you can request your opponent draws with you so that you do not risk that threshold. And because Swiss usually pairs you up with similar or same records, a draw will often benefit both you and your opponent. Before I say anything else, this is completely legal within the rules of Lorcana. You are allowed to offer an intentional draw 1 time during a round, and 1 time only. So if you sit down and offer a draw to your opponent and then they say no, you will have to play it out. I will also mention that you are not allowed to offer any sort of compensation for this draw or anything else. A lot of people have a lot of hate for this, and I understand why. A player being rewarded for not playing the game they're currently competing in can feel unfair. And even more so when someone loses a spot in Top Cut because of someone or multiple people taking advantage of IDs. Some other games have constructed their events in ways that make IDs hard to impossible by either having judges watch over games that go to time to make sure the players are playing earnestly, or making draws double losses, meaning no one gets a point. As someone who has played TCGs for the majority of my life with multiple of these rule sets, it is my opinion that any quote-unquote solution to IDs makes a competitive environment that feels leagues worse than an environment where IDs are just allowed in the rules, and quite frankly, it's easier on the tournament organizers, players, and judges as well. There was a lot of discourse online, and it got heated on both sides. I don't think just sitting here and saying get good is the right way to go about it, but neither is condemning those who did ID as being unsportsmanlike. This is something that is written in the rules, so it is currently allowed. If the rules change in the future, then change. Until then, it's best to treat this like going to an event after already winning. If you don't like it, you don't have to do it. Okay, everyone can take a breath now. The heavy stuff is over. For the last part of this video, we're going to be taking a look at some specific situations brought to me in the thread and my responses to them. First is one that was brought up a few different ways, but specifically from @GhostType. Last weekend was my first ever card tournament. I wasn't quite prepared for how long of a day it really was. I made top 4, so by the end of the day, I'd been playing for almost 9 hours straight. My brain was mush at the end there. Congratulations on this accomplishment, first of all. Earning a stitch alone is a great achievement, but doing so in your first ever event is even more admirable. Regarding your experience, yeah, these events are surprisingly long. It's about as mentally draining as taking multiple final exams back to back to back. So treat it that way. Get yourself in a proper routine with sleep and nutrition, preferably the full week beforehand. You need to be in peak shape at the beginning of the day, so by the end of the day, you aren't the Walking Dead. Next is Rebecca at the Illuminary. Stress, anxiety, and nerves, and mental fatigue for the long day were some of the big ones. I know I'm capable of playing better than I did, but the mental and emotional aspects of the day totally threw me off. Great hearing from you, Rebecca, and I hope that your next events work out for you in this department. Being low mentally during an event like this is rough, because it can cause a snowball effect that can lead to other misplays and losses, which gets you even more down. Everyone is probably going to have a different way that is best for them to recenter themselves. But for me, every round is completely isolated from the rest of the event. I do this by allowing myself a moment to express the emotion the last match left me with. Very quickly, whether it's a high five to a friend to celebrate a win, or a light pat on my cheek to jolt me out of a loss. After that, I do my best to flush all these emotions and try to get back to a neutral ground before the start of the next round. Music, getting up and walking around, having a snack or some water, getting fresh air, all of these are tactics that I employ to help me flush the emotions. Now, regarding the stress, anxiety, and nerves, just know that even after a decade and a half of competing in events like these, I still have moments in particularly close games or at the beginning of a tournament and right before standings are posted at the end of the tournament, where all these emotions flow through me and I can't think of anything else. There's also probably some adrenaline in there for me as well, but I think the biggest thing is reminding yourself that this is your escape from the normal world to go and have fun. Your friends are by your side, and regardless of the outcome of the event, you're still going to be walking out of that event with some great memories of even greater people. Take a breath and take every action one step at a time. From @KitCatten, for me, it was probably game speed. I've only played Paper maybe 4 times locally, but being on the clock in a very competitive setting and getting to a few game 3s added that extra pressure each turn. This is interesting to me since I've played competitive sports since I could walk, so as long as I can remember, I was doing things while being timed, so I've never actually experienced clock anxiety. But it's something that I've seen in friends of mine. What we've tried to do is either drill it into their head that the clock isn't something that you can control, and you can only fully control the speed at which you're playing. If your opponent seems to be moving slower later in the round, though, you need to be strong and speak up to them and request that they move faster. I know confrontation can be intimidating, but making sure that your opponent is playing honestly is absolutely something that warrants speaking up about. The second way is during prep for a specific event, we would test with timers to get the feel for how fast the format moves and to get a better idea of how we need to handle things. The last Twitter comment I want to bring up is one from SmartyB. It was my first as well. I was surprised at how quickly the tone changed in our small casual play group members once the prizes started appearing for sale at high prices. Went from, we'll make sure we all get one, to sorry you didn't get one, gonna sell my duplicates. Yeah, this is a tough situation. Often with prizes, there will be groups that get together and travel together in an attempt to get everyone one of these. With how widely popular this brand is, though, it's very easy for people to see a month or two worth of rent in these cards and completely change their attitude towards them, which is neither good or bad. If you're in a group with plans like this, you need to make sure that everyone is on the same page about what exactly the plan is. If someone is hesitant to commit to the plan, then they should not be part of said plan. Doing so will decrease the chances of other people disappointing you, but it'll also give some people outs so that they don't feel that they are too pressured to do something that they don't want to do. Essentially, it just comes down to communication between the friend group. Before we wrap up here, I did want to mention one more thing that I noticed. The prizing structure. While stores were given free rein on creating extra prizing, I saw a very wide margin of prizing that made people feel a bit weird. Some stores did extreme prices for Top Cut on top of the stitches, making things even more top heavy, and everything in between. Because of this, I think there were a lot of people who felt a bit of a whiplash going from one event where they may have bubbled out and still received packs to another event where they lost early but first place got a stitch, playmat, multiple boxes of product, and the kitchen sink. I understand that these events had loose guidelines in an attempt to make it easier for stores to get the kits and run the events, but I do think that there should probably be a simple structure on extra prizing going forward so that there's a sense of similarity in these events. That's it. Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope something I've said resonates with you, and it helps in the next set championship events. As always, thank you for visiting the Traverse Tavern. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, as it's the best way to support us here, and I hope you have a wonderful day.